The cafe smelled of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries, a comforting aroma that wrapped around the single mom as she pushed open the door. Her hands were slightly calloused, evidence of long hours at work and the constant juggle of bills, groceries, and her 2 young children. She carried a worn leather purse, the kind that had seen better days, and a small notebook where she meticulously tracked her expenses. Her eyes scanned the cozy space, soft golden lights hanging from the ceiling, the hum of quiet conversations, and the occasional laugh of someone stealing a moment of respite from their busy lives. She made her way to the counter, shoulders slightly hunched but her expression composed. Behind the counter stood a man in a sharp, tailored suit. He exuded wealth effortlessly, from the glint of his expensive watch to the perfectly pressed lines of his trousers. A playful smirk tugged at his lips as he noticed her approach. "I just want to see my bill," she said, her tone polite but tinged with a quiet firmness. There was no hesitation, no embarrassment, only a calm demand for what she had rightfully earned and spent. The billionaire leaned casually against the counter, arms crossed, clearly entertained. "Just the bill?" he asked, amusement lacing his voice, not expecting anything special. She glanced up, meeting his gaze evenly. There was a strength in her eyes, a kind of resilience shaped by sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and the constant grind of providing for her family. He was used to seeing people flustered by his presence, their confidence dissolving under the weight of his wealth. But she remained steady, unshaken. She handed over her receipt, a simple piece of paper, and for a moment, the ordinary act of paying a bill became a silent confrontation between 2 worlds, one of privilege, one of survival. The billionaire tapped the display screen, expecting the usual theatrics, an inflated total, a minor mistake, or perhaps even a confused customer fumbling with the numbers. His smirk lingered as he glanced at her, certain he would have a reason to laugh. But the numbers that appeared on the screen stopped him in his tracks. The total was exact. Every item she had ordered matched perfectly with the price she had been charged. No hidden fees, no extra add-ons, no overcharging. It was precise, honest, and completely fair, a reflection of meticulousness he hadn't expected in someone from her world. His fingers hovered over the touchscreen, almost uncertain, as if he needed to check twice to make sure he wasn't mistaken. She watched him quietly, her calm expression giving nothing away. Her life had been shaped by these small victories, making ends meet, stretching every cent, ensuring her children had enough to eat in a warm bed at night. Paying the exact amount for a simple cafe meal was not a triumph in the grand scheme of things, but it was one more instance where she had kept control of her life despite the chaos around her. For the first time, the billionaire felt something he rarely experienced, surprise without a trace of amusement. He leaned in closer, studying the display, trying to reconcile the quiet confidence of this woman with the ordinary expectation of mistakes or hesitations. His smirk faded, replaced by a curious, almost respectful expression. There was no need to laugh. There was no room for mockery. She had handled a small, everyday task with precision, dignity, and quiet authority, and it unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The billionaire leaned back slightly, still staring at the display, a mixture of disbelief and admiration crossing his face. He had expected awkward fumbling, nervous glances, or even a tiny error she might overlook. Instead, he saw precision, honesty, and quiet confidence. For someone so used to commanding attention and having the world bend to his whims, this was unfamiliar territory. He felt an unexpected tug of respect, a feeling he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. She returned the receipt with calm efficiency, her hands steady and her eyes unwavering. There was no rush, no fluster, no hint of insecurity. Just a simple, deliberate exchange, the kind that spoke of a life lived on responsibility and principle rather than wealth and power. He noticed the faint lines around her eyes, the weariness that came not from laziness but from constant labor and sacrifice. This woman had endured far more than any fleeting discomfort of a cafe transaction, and yet she carried herself with dignity that made him pause. I didn't expect that," he admitted finally, his voice quieter than before, almost humbled. He struggled to hide the genuine surprise in his expression. There was something magnetic about the way she navigated life, not with bravado or entitlement, but with resilience, patience, and integrity. Every movement, every gesture, radiated quiet strength, the kind of strength money could never buy. The soft hum of the cafe, the low chatter of other patrons, and the scent of coffee created a cocoon around them, a temporary world where the usual rules of privilege and wealth seemed irrelevant. He realized that in this simple moment, over a mere bill, he had been confronted with a truth he rarely faced. Character and integrity were far more commanding than any title, any fortune, or any smirk he could muster. The billionaire straightened, a rare vulnerability flickering across his usually confident face. He had come to the cafe expecting amusement, maybe a smirk, perhaps even a brief sense of superiority. Instead, he felt something entirely unexpected: admiration. This woman, weary yet composed, had silently upended the assumptions he had built his life around. He realized that no amount of money, influence, or power could replicate the quiet strength she carried. "Keep the change," he said, the words surprising even himself. There was no showmanship in his voice, no desire to flaunt wealth, just a simple gesture of respect. She blinked, momentarily confused, then accepted it gracefully, sliding the extra coins into her worn purse. It was small in monetary value, but it felt monumental in symbolism. In that brief exchange, he acknowledged not just her diligence and honesty, but the courage required to navigate a world stacked against her. For her, it was just another day. She had spent her life learning to manage every penny, to stretch her resources, and to rise above challenges that might have crushed someone else. A few coins more or less didn't matter. But for him, the lesson resonated deeply. He returned to his office, casting one last glance toward her. There was a quiet dignity in the way she gathered her things and left the cafe, one that no luxury could replicate and no privilege could diminish. As he sank into his chair, he reflected on the encounter. He had laughed at the notion of a simple bill, confident that wealth gave him insight into human nature. Yet here, in a small, unremarkable cafe, he had been humbled. She had reminded him that true strength isn't flaunted, it's lived quietly, persistently, and with integrity. From that day forward, he found himself thinking of her, not as a customer, but as a symbol of resilience he rarely encountered. Her life was far from easy, yet she met it head-on, with clarity, determination, and dignity. And he, a man accustomed to power and wealth, realized that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, admiration is earned not by grand gestures but by simply being steadfast in one's truth. In the end, a simple cafe bill became more than a transaction. It became a quiet moment of mutual recognition. One person surviving with honor, the other learning humility, and both forever changed by a brief, unexpected encounter.